Hey guys, thanks for being with us here at Season 4, Episode 8 of the Through Their Eyes podcast. This is a podcast on the Scattered Abroad Network, which is a work of the Memphis School of Preaching, and we're here today in the House to House studios. We're thankful that they made it possible for us to kind of come to this central location because a lot of the guests that we're using are from this area or nearby, and it's harder to get them towards our neck of the woods, so this was a perfect solution. They provide a ton of good content as well for you to be consuming as a Christian, and we hope and pray that you'll check that out. Their information will be down in the description and the show notes below. This season, we've been talking about the minister files and making it a priority for us to try to see different things that ministers are involved in as balance is concerned. And today, as always, I'm Michael Clark, the Director of Operations at the Scattered Abroad Network. I have with me Wayne Rogers, Director of Programming, and our guest is no stranger to doing something like this. We're thankful that he took some time. He happened to be doing a gospel meeting nearby, and we're glad that we got him to come into the studio today. We have Don Blackwell with us. Don, welcome to the program. Go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody.
Hey, I am Don Blackwell, and I am the Director of the Gospel Broadcasting Network. We've got a lot of directors here today. Yeah. I noticed, and I work with the church in Cookeville, North Carolina, the Cookeville Church of Christ. I'm one of the elders there. I'm not the preacher there. I travel full-time and work with the Gospel Broadcasting Network.
Yeah, and we're talking today about that very subject matter, traveling ministry. It's kind of interesting. You're just about to embark on this journey. I've been on it for a couple of years, and you've been on it for a couple of decades. And so we have all different areas of somewhat expertise here of traveling and being used to doing that kind of thing. We probably all have our own way of traveling and the preferences that we have. I know that with what happened to you years ago, your travel has become a little bit more intense than it normally had been. It was a little bit more difficult now to do certain things that you've got to look for certain types of rooms and certain types of bathroom abilities with the shower. So all of that is stuff that we're going to kind of be talking about today. But before we get to the difficulties, let's talk about the positives, right? What are the benefits, Don, of being a traveling minister?
Well, when I got your questions, I sat down last night and I tried to make a list of some things. And the first thing that came to my mind, and Sherry was with me, so I asked her, she travels with me a lot of the time. So I said, what are some of the benefits? And we both said the same thing, and that is we meet a lot of people. We encounter some absolutely amazing brethren in different places, and I have stories of different people with interesting careers, some of the finest, kindest people I've met anywhere, and it really stands out. I would say that's the greatest thing is all the people I get to meet.
Yeah, that's certainly been something. I told my wife one time, I said, dude, I'm somewhere different most every other week, and you meet so many different people, and then you go to a convention like PTP, and a lot of those people happen to be there too, and people that maybe you've forgotten that you've met, which is natural as you meet so many people, they're coming up to you and saying, hey, we remember you when you came here, and it's just a nice boost of this family, which we've talked about on this season as well, the family of God that is lifting you up and they care about you. And when I had some health problems a couple months ago, several of these people that I would not have known had I not been traveling and preaching in certain places, were reaching out to me, emailing, writing on Facebook, different things, texting, and saying, we've been praying for you so that you can get better. And I know you know what that experience is like on a grander scale, which people knew who you were because of the work you've done extensively. But when it came to the point where you had the problem where you lost the ability to walk and became a paraplegic, talk about the benefits of what it was like for a traveling minister then, because I remember hearing the stories. I never got to come and see you. I was too far away to be able to make it, but tell us about the cards and all of that kind of thing that you saw.
Sherry mentioned that to me last night, one of the benefits. She said, I think the reason we had such an outpouring of support is because we've been so many places over the years and we know so many people. And because of that, while I was in the hospital, we just had people every day. I didn't count it. I wish now that I had, but I would say hundreds, literally hundreds of people came through to visit. The cards, we counted 2,800 physical cards that came through, and they kept going until 4,000 after I got out of the hospital, not counting messages and calls and Facebook. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I traveled so many places and done videos that are out there. But one of the great blessings is you get love and support from so many people. That was another thing on my list, was the kindness that is expressed. One of the things I've noticed that's become popular nowadays, when you go into a gospel meeting, a lot of places will have a gift basket in the room waiting for you, filled, maybe it's not a good thing because it's usually filled with chocolate and goodies, and you can't help but eat it. But so many churches have expressed kindness. One recently, I was talking to them about the cost of maintaining this power standing wheelchair, and I told them to replace the batteries, and it was almost $6,000. And when I left and they paid me for the meeting, they handed me a check and said, "This is for the batteries." And I could tell you many stories like that, just some of the blessings of going so many places.
Yeah, the kindness is on full display when you get to travel. And when you stay in one area, there's nothing wrong about that. Of course, people live locally. The local congregation has the same ability to act as that family and lift you up. But the contacts as they grow, it's just a boost in the arm knowing that these people who I'll leave today, and I may not see them for a year, 2 years, I may not see them again, but they're praying for me. They're praying for the work to be doing, and to be done in a way that promotes the kingdom further. And that's just a boost that I've seen too.
You get to know the local preacher, because I went and did a meeting there where Wayne was preaching. And of course I knew Wayne and Cindy, but not as well. But when you spend time with them, and I guess I did one in both places you were preaching recently, and you get to spend time with them and you get to know them, you get to know the local preachers, and a week together in a meeting helps bond you and bind you together, and that's another blessing.
Yeah. Did you have any other blessings that you wrote down, or do you want me to throw it to Wayne now?
Let's see what Wayne's got to say.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm looking forward to, because we're in the middle of that transition or about to start that transition, the time of recording. So we're moving into that traveling phase, I guess, of ministry and looking at things. So, in our work that we're trying to do, we're wanting to bring that encouragement to congregations, so trying to reach into some areas where, so kind of looking at the other side of that. But I know that there's always a benefit. It's just like anytime you make in local work, you make a visit to someone and you're thinking, well, I'm going to encourage sister so-and-so, and you leave and you're the one that's actually built up and, right, encouraged and all that too. So I know that there's a mutual thing that's going to certainly, that happens certainly in traveling. The other question, the next question is about really to turn and think about the pitfalls, if you will, of being a traveling, and I'm interested in that because I need to know what to look forward to, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly, so to speak. So, what are some of the pitfalls that we might run into?
The first pitfall that I wrote down is probably not going to apply to you unless you've got a surprise, and that is, if you've got little kids, then I don't recommend. You don't have any little kids.
We do not.
If you've got little kids, don't be a traveling preacher.
Yeah.
It's so hard. And I look back when I was a located preacher, but I did a lot of gospel meetings and traveled for GBN. And I look back at that time and I wish I could get it back. And so that was the first thing. Second thing I wrote down, if you're traveling a lot, you spend a lot of time in hotels. And I know I talked with your dad. We've exchanged hotel stories because there's hotel nightmares. I think sometimes, brethren, they don't know. They put you up in a place that maybe they've used for 20 years, and 20 years ago it was a good place, but it's not anymore. Particularly before my accident, I got put in some rough places. Now, requiring a roll-in shower, usually it's the better hotels that have the better handicap facilities are usually nicer hotels. But I can remember being in a place where the heat didn't work. It was full blast or nothing. And so I'd have to get up every hour during the night and turn it on or off. I can remember some places that were so filthy. The shower curtain had mold on it and you're trying to not touch it while you're in the shower. I can remember many times the smoke alarm goes off during the night and you have to get up and leave, drunks being in the hotel. And so living in hotels, but you won't be in a hotel though, will you?
Will not.
Okay. You're going to be in a camper?
And a camper, yeah.
Yeah, rub it in. Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
Just a truck and trailer, so.
you're definitely right. I'm fortunate. I don't always get to bring my family with me, but I'm fortunate that Megan has a job where most of the weekends they get to go with me.
Okay.
And that's a huge benefit. And, Adam, when he was younger and going with us, he believed that like we owned these rooms everywhere we went. And so we were driving by one place and he says, "What room do we own there, Daddy?" And I was like, "We don't own anything there, but we rented it for a night or two." But, the pitfalls there for sure of having young kids is it can be a difficult and certainly a stressor in some ways because they're not always able to go because some of the conventions I have to go to are 10,000 people and you can't have a 6-year-old running around there without constant supervision. And so that's certainly a pitfall. And I also agree. The hotels are certainly not all bad, like you mentioned. And I'm fortunate that the Hilton properties are usually pretty fair priced and they're pretty decent overall. But I did stay in a hotel in your area. In Cookeville, we talked about this, where I got into bed that night. I didn't know it was a handicapped room at first, but I got in and the sheets were wet.
Oh.
And I put my feet down there and they were just soaking wet. Oh. And I remember calling you about that and they said, well, they probably felt like nobody would notice because it's a handicapped room. Oh. And that was one of those experiences where it was like, I had to take the pillows that they provided and put down there and prop my feet up because it was 3 in the morning. I couldn't go down and get new sheets and do anything else.
Yeah.
And certainly those horror stories are there.
Now in my new situation, I have different challenges being in hotels. I'm usually in fact, the Hilton chain is really handicap friendly. Those are some of the best I found. But I require a roll-in shower because I've got a special chair that holds me up when I go into the shower. And frequently I will get there to check in and they've given my room to someone else. Yeah. And they say, well, we've given you a shower with a shower that's got a flip down seat. And I'll say, but I can't get a roll-in shower into that. That happens, even though I've got a reservation and it will be on my reservation, probably a third of the time that happens. I have found that oftentimes I'll get there, there's no place to park a handicapped vehicle. And so I've got that challenge, and sometimes they'll let me park under the overhang so I can deal with that. Very frequently, you'll go into what's supposed to be an ADA room that meets the handicap qualifications, and the mirror, you will be able to see the top of your head, and that is all. Or the sink, you can't get your legs up under it, and so you'll have to sit 2 feet away. So when you brush your teeth, it's you spit and try to get it in there, or you'll have to turn sideways. And so, or the plugs will be in a place that in a wheelchair, you cannot get to them. And so it's a whole different set of challenges now. Where I am this week, they've put me in a handicap accessible cabin, and it is super cool. It's got a roll-in shower, but it's been a nice thing.
Yeah, well, I know that the biggest thing for me a lot of times is leaving from one location to get to the next location. There's a lot of night driving that is involved, and that can be challenging in some ways. But then it's just probably the easiest thing that I'm sure you can relate to from the time that you did this without your family with you. But you go sit down at a restaurant and everybody else is with their family, their wife, whatever, and you're just by yourself. And you get into this mode of like a slight depression of, man, I just wish they could be with me, wish they were with me right now, and it's just not able to happen this particular time. But
I always had people who wanted to eat with me. I didn't eat by myself. Maybe that's just you.
Hey, well,
maybe.
I did have one time where I went with my wife and she chose to sit at another table. No, but those things obviously affect us in ways that the depression side, which I'm sure you experienced, but you have other pitfalls as well that you want to talk about?
Yeah, in fact, I made a whole list as time will allow.
Absolutely.
Another thing I thought about, when you're doing gospel meetings, which I do a lot of, I use to promote GBN, but gospel meetings are a good way to do that.
Right.
When you do gospel meetings, you tend to do the same sermons over and over. Yeah. You find the ones that are effective and fit well for meetings. And when you do that, it gets to the point that you kind of get tired of it. It's like I've preached, especially Sherry. She said, what are we going to hear this time? And I'll tell her, and she'll say, oh, I've heard that sermon 1,000 times. And I understand that's a difficulty. And as a preacher, it's good to keep your mind fresh and challenging. In local work, you write something new every single week. And so that's pretty different. You may be experiencing that when you're on the road, Wayne.
Probably so, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you got a plan. When you go to new churches, are you going to be doing the same sort of thing, or?
A lot of times it'll be, well, every week it could be different, because of the situation. Sometimes we may just be stopping in. I may not even be speaking.
Oh, okay.
And then just kind of assessing the situation, and letting them know what we're doing. And it may be on a trip back through that we're actually,
Gotcha.
getting an opportunity to do some. So sometimes it might just be coming in, introducing ourselves, and sometimes we might be talking about what we're doing, and sometimes we may be actually there working for 2 or 3 weeks at a time.
Okay.
Okay.
Another challenge I found is just keeping up with normal life back home.
Mm-hmm.
Things like getting your oil changed, because if you leave on Saturday and you drive a day to a meeting and you're there Wednesday, you drive back on Thursday, you've got Friday, and if you've got another meeting, you're going to leave on Saturday. I try to not go back to back. I try to space things out at least every other week, because you've got things like oil changes, home maintenance, doctor's appointments, cutting the grass, things that break, things that you wouldn't think about, but there's always a load of that kind of stuff to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the big struggle for me a lot of times as I get back in. And I talked about this on another episode this summer, but where are you going to be tomorrow? Oh, well, I can't be in the office from 9 to 2 because I've got to do these doctor's appointments and other things. And it's like, and you just don't realize just how much time that does consume when you're able to do it on your own pace and all of that.
Yeah. And that leads to the next point I had, and that was a study, work, preparation is difficult, because when you're away from your normal office, you don't have your big screen, your computer, you don't have your books. You're working off of a small laptop, and especially now I've got so much handicap equipment to carry. Carrying other things are very difficult. You're working on a little table in a hotel room. A lot of your time gets eaten up driving. When you're in gospel meetings, you visit with the brethren, you spend time, you have a fellowship meal, you preach, you've got time loading and unloading. And like I say, typically Saturday you drive all day, Thursday you drive all day. And so if you're writing manuscripts, it becomes very difficult to sit down. And so preparation of materials is very, very difficult when you're on the road and traveling a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something. My wife makes fun of me because I have travel chargers, and they just stay in the bag. I never take them out.
Same here.
And that seems smart, right? Then you never have to take your charger out, and it's always there. But that's the kind of thing that you don't think about, having a go bag, basically, always ready with most of what you need.
I learned that because I used to move it back and forth, and after a few times of getting there and having no charger, you create a bag with all of those things that stay there.
That's right. Yeah. They do make now, just because I know you would be interested in this, and you probably will be interested in this too. They've got these portable monitors now that are really nice. They plug in. There's companies like Arzopa that have that. We'll put the information in the show notes if anybody's interested. But they're nice to kind of plug up, and it's like a 17-inch monitor.
Wow!
So at least it gives you a double screen or a triple screen if you want to get 2 of them, and they're pretty affordable for what they are. But it's still not the setup you're used to,
right?
And all of that with you recording things with Scattered Abroad. The problem I came into as well was I had to get a podcast bag. And make all of that too. Have you had to do stuff like that as well?
I've got a bag yay big. I've tried to put it, make it as light as possible with as light of tripods and things, because just me having to carry it and handle it. And of course, loading and unloading everything, being paralyzed from here down, it's challenging to load my van and pack my van. Most places, my dad lives next door to me, and so he oftentimes will load me. He's 80 years old, but he's still loading me. When I arrive, usually brethren will unload me. But if I have to go 2 days trip to get somewhere, I stop at a hotel and I have to load and unload myself. And it's challenging to do that. Sometimes it takes multiple trips in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
I've created a little wagon I can load my stuff in and hook it to the back of the wheelchair. So I try to be as light as possible, but that is a challenge, yeah.
And that's something that you saying that puts in perspective for me. I take that for granted, the ability to just quickly load and have everything in an easy way, because though I do have equipment I've got to take, I certainly don't have to do the level that you've got. So it's amazing how quickly we just kind of think that life's just so simple, but then we complain when I've got to load it all up. And sure, you've seen these carts that are not the full carts, they're the half cart or whatever.
I hate those. They're getting more and more all the time.
I went somewhere and just asked, is it like required that you do this? Do you have to have these?
Yeah.
So all of that is certainly an issue. You have any more pitfalls?
That's about all I had.
Okay, Wayne.
So let's move in. Let's think about congregational life for just a moment, but also you're traveling preacher, in that way. So how difficult is it to be a member full-time when you're on the road full-time?
That is a great question. It really is. And it is challenging. It really takes very intentional effort to do this, making time for brethren. Things slip between the cracks when you're not there. Trying to make visits like you normally would, seeing people in the hospital and you're gone. When you're home, you typically, at least once a week, we'd want to try to take someone out to dinner, doing local evangelism. Yeah. These are difficult things when you're on the road. If you are teaching a class, and when I'm home, I typically do, and then if you're gone every other Sunday and sometimes a few in a row, it destroys the continuity of your class. And so if you're not really, really engaged, you can unintentionally become disconnected to the local congregation. You miss little events in people's lives, and you miss church events and banquets and meals. Some things you don't learn unless you just spend time with people. You can look at the bulletin, but things just slip between the cracks, and that does hurt you. It's very challenging.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know that when I was recently come home from a trip, I'd been on the road for several weekends in a row, and I came home and I said something about someone in the congregation. She said, "Oh yeah, they're pregnant." I said, "When did that happen?" She said, "Like 2 months ago they announced."
Wow.
Well, that's the kind of thing though, when you're not able, and the sad thing is they probably put it in the email and I just skimmed and missed it. But like you talk about, it's so easy to get kind of caught up in what you're doing that you forget about the local side of things, especially if you're not able to be there every Sunday. Like you say, you can stagger things out, and you do that for those specific reasons. When those weekends do happen, though, where there's nothing you can do about it, that also, then you come back and you're like, what have I missed? And it feels like you're getting a recap on a TV show that is 3 seasons long.
I can remember over the years, people who had a loved one die, and they wanted me to do the funeral, but I was in a gospel meeting or something like that. And I've missed several over the years because of that. And all these years, I still remember it. It just grieves me that has happened. And I remember one, they really wanted me to do the funeral, but I was going to be gone for an obligation I felt like I really needed to. So I wrote the funeral and gave it to one of the elders, and they did it. And that seemed to suffice. But I made a list of a few of the things that I've done to help mitigate this a little bit. One is keep up with the bulletin and read it, go through these things, because there will be things in there. Number 2, spend time talking to the preacher or the other elders on the phone, and they'll keep you in the loop. I spend hours on the phone every week we have 2 elders, I'm one of them. So I spend hours on the phone every week talking to the other elder, and sometimes just talking, and things come up. Oh yeah, did you know this happened to this person and this person? And that helps immensely. Spend the time in the car calling the members. I found that really does pay off. When I was in local work, I would take one day and just spend time trying to call the people. You can do that while you're driving.
Right.
And it keeps you in the loop, and it keeps you close to people. And so there are things you can do on the road, and a lot while you're driving that helps.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've noticed that with scattered abroad stuff. I'll often call Wayne while I'm driving or call somebody else. That's a great point. You got nothing but road in front of you.
That's right.
And it's not like you have anything else to do with your time except talk to people, and that will also, I think, even though it's not a burden to call while driving, people will take that as a really big compliment to them that you would take time out of your day to call them while you're driving and traveling.
That's right. And then you've got, sometimes you'll run across somebody who's lonely and they just want to talk. You've got 8 hours on the road and they can just talk, and that helps them and it helps you.
Yeah. Right. Before I get to the last question, do you have anything else?
I'll go ahead.
The one thing I wanted to say too, bringing a positive conclusion to the traveling side of things, because our last question is not so much about traveling ministry as it is an elder and a minister at the same time, because I know you've done that and are doing that as a preacher now. But one thing that hit me when I was thinking about this subject, a lot of times traveling ministers are kind of viewed with a disdain among people. Not that they're not doing a good thing, but it's like, I just don't know how they do that. I don't understand how they could do that. There's kind of a negative connotation at times in people's minds. Then I thought about this from a positive spin. Obviously, we know the Apostle Paul did missionary journeys and all of that kind of thing, but that's not really what we do.
No.
But when I look at Matthew 10 and I see what Jesus did with the disciples, he sent them out and had them go everywhere, preaching and teaching. I think about Jesus traveling for 3 years, going place to place and preaching and teaching. And I think about what a blessing it is that though I'm not a disciple in the way that they were, don't have miraculous ability, I'm certainly not the Son of God, I get to kind of experience the same level of ministry that he was doing, where he wasn't in one place only, and he went and did that. And what a blessing it is to kind of have that, to look at his life and say, I get to kind of follow in the footsteps of the way that Jesus did ministry, going place to place. And then Acts chapter 8 always, resonates with me with Philip, where after he was done, he went city to city preaching the gospel. And what a blessing it is that we would have the ability to do that. And certainly not everyone can, but I've chosen over the last few years to look at it more positively in that way, because, man, to read what the disciples were told to do and to think that we have a benefit of getting to travel and do some of the same stuff they were tasked with doing. And what a blessing to be able to have that role.
I am very thankful that I'm still able to travel and do these things. I'm 52 years old and a paraplegic, so I don't know how many more years I'll be able to keep doing this. And at some point, I'm going to need to stay home and work. But in the meantime, I just keep pressing. But like you say, there's so many benefits to it. It's a good shot in the arm oftentimes to the local congregation. It's a good shot in the arm for the local preacher to have that fellowship. And people who say, well, gospel meetings don't work anymore. Virtually every place I go, we will have restorations or baptisms during the gospel meeting.
Right.
The gospel is the power of God unto salvation. If we go and preach it, it will still work.
That's
Absolutely.
right.
And for me, if I go to a gospel meeting, the brethren pay my way to come. They pay for my hotel. They pay for my food. And I get to plug GBN all week. So I get to talk about the word and put tools in their hands to help their local work. And so it's just the best of both worlds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a typical Sunday, that you have every week, there's not a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday meeting that's also going on after that. You just have Sunday and Wednesday. I don't know how it could be a problem to have a gospel meeting and not be seen as a benefit.
Sure.
And certainly that's a wonderful thing that you're privileged to be able to still do, and I'm thankful for it. But when we look at what we just mentioned a moment ago, elder and minister melded together, some people will look at that and go, how does that work? So what balance does it take to put both hats on?
That has been, you mean not traveling, just an elder and a preacher?
Just as it, yes.
I have done both of those for about 7 years total that I was both a preacher and an elder. Right now I'm an elder, but not the local preacher.
Right.
So it is challenging to be the preacher and be an elder. But what I think is you've got to keep them separate in your mind. That is, I'm a gospel preacher and I'm an elder. And so when decisions have to be made that relate to the preacher, don't think about yourself in a personal way. You need to look at it from the perspective of an elder. What is best for the congregation? And I have had several occasions where I have voted against myself because I thought, I'm trying to be objective. As an elder, I think it would be best if the preacher did not do this or did not get a raise or whatever it is. And I've tried to be completely objective and think what is best for the congregation. Because some people will say, well, the preacher shouldn't be an elder because, he could vote for himself. Well, if he's doing that, he's probably not the right heart and is probably not qualified to be an elder in the first place. But a man who's what he ought to be, you've got to step back and you've got to look at it that way. What is best for the church, not what is best for me.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to do that no matter what. I've had several meetings where I've stepped out and said to the other elders, you vote on this without me because I think I can be objective, but you don't want anyone to question the decision. You make this decision without me in there.
That's wise. I think that puts a good perspective on it. I know that we try in our own right to do that with some of the stuff we do here. As I said, I don't have to be involved. Wayne will say sometimes, I don't have to vote on that. It's fine. That's a good decision making that you've got there, because if anybody does try to accuse it, you can say, I didn't vote.
Yeah, that's right.
So it wasn't my deciding vote that was cast that did this.
Yeah.
Don, do you have anything else you want to add on that?
Not on that. I don't know how much time we have left, but I made a list of things that I do that help as a traveling preacher.
Sure.
But I can share some of those or not, depending on how much time we have.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Some things, I just made a few bullet points of things that I do to help deal with the load when you're traveling. Number one, I try to double up as much as possible. If I'm doing a manuscript on, whatever, marriage, divorce, and remarriage, then when I do the weekly podcast, Truth on Wheels, it'll be on marriage, divorce, and remarriage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When I get home, if I'm teaching a class, it's going to be on marriage, divorce, and remarriage. And so I try to use those things. And that's good for any preacher, to try to double up. Secondly, I have used some good planning software. I have a good calendar. I use a BusyCal on my Mac, and it will synchronize with everything. And I can set up reminders and notifications. I use Apple Notes extensively. And so those things really, really help keep me on track. And when you're a traveling preacher, it is easy to let something slip between the cracks. And then thirdly, I've alluded to already, and that is do as much as you can on the road. I do meetings, I do calls, anything that I can do that I can sit my phone in the holder and do while I'm on the road. It's amazing. In fact, I try to save up that. Someone will say, can we talk about something? And I'll say, I'm driving all day tomorrow. And I put on Apple Notes, here's the list of people to call, and then go down. And that is a great use of time. I've also found, I downloaded a program called Natural Reader is what it's called. You can take your books, you scan them ahead of time, and you load them in there, and it will read it to me in an AI voice, very natural sounding, while I am driving or doing something like that. I've killed some books. I mean, I've gone through a lot of books and learning. In fact, some difficult books, I'll listen to them at a slower speed or repeatedly. If I'm going to speak somewhere, I'll load my notes into that and let it read the sermon to me multiple times before I get there. Of course, you can turn on YouTube and just listen to it while you're driving. And so I found between books, things you listen to, making calls, most of the time, a trip is just cram-packed with rich, productive time. Of course, a lot of it means you have to have an internet signal, but if you're driving through the deep country, then you might be in trouble. But
well, that's been helpful to me because I'm always looking for hacks to make this easier. And certainly, I know that you were excited to hear all that.
Absolutely.
Well, Don, thank you for being with us today,
thank you.
For coming this way. I would thank Wayne, but he had to be here. So, there's really no point in doing that. But we're thankful to you that have been watching and listening. We're grateful that you've taken the time to put God in your life and in your daily schedule. And hopefully this Thursday, Lord willing, we'll have Don back with us to do a Did That Really Happen? That's the podcast that's usually more laid back in its nature of telling some stories of things that have happened. We look forward to that. Don't forget to check out the show notes or in the description here on this YouTube video, all of the different things that we have to offer, as well as the links to what Don is involved in doing with GBN and others, House to House. All of the great things can be found there. You can email us at san@msop.org if you have any questions or you're interested in knowing more about the network. But until Thursday, take care and God bless.